Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast, where I seek truth in the world's great books. I'm your host, Eric Rostad, coming to you from the beautiful Books of Titans studio in Franklin, Tennessee. My goal is to read 200 of the great books over the next 10 years and share what I'm learning. I'll talk a bit about each book, tie ideas together from a variety of genres, and share the one thing I always hope to remember from each of the great books. Today I'm going to cover the Trojan Women, a tragedy play by Euripides. This is from book 35 from my 2024 reading list, and Euripides is selection 15 from my great books reading list. Well, I'm going to start by reading from around the center of this tragedy play, and this is the chorus, which is made up of Trojan captive women. Sing, O Muse, a new song about Ilium, a funeral dirge accompanied by tears. For now I shall cry out a song for Troy, a song of how I was destroyed, became a wretched captive of the spear, victim of the four-wheeled wooden horse of the Greeks when the Achaeans left it at the gates as it clattered to the heaven, bedecked with gold, crammed with arms. Sing, O Muse, a new song about Ilium. That's how it starts. Ilium is another word for Troy, and whenever the Muses are called, it's a key to really pay attention, because this is going to be something important. And it's so interesting that the chorus calls for a new song about Ilium. This is not a song or story about glory. This is not the glory of war. This is not the battle. This is not the lust for war and Ares and blood and this is the destruction after. This is the aftermath of war. This is the pain and utter sadness and hopelessness that come in the immediate aftermath of war. So the Trojan horse has gone in, as we heard in that opening part. The Greeks have come out of that horse. They've gotten through a wall that they were not able to take by force, by war. They get through a wall by trickery, and once they're inside, they kill the men, they kill the children, and they take the women as slaves. And so the Trojan Women, the name of this play, refers to those women who have now been captured, have been taken as slaves from Troy. And we're in this kind of in-between period of the immediate aftermath of the Trojan War, but yet before the Greeks have started to sail home. So the women are in the tents with the Greeks, and it's this really interesting part of the story that we don't get in the Iliad or the Odyssey, but this part of the story that's kind of this in-between period, but where the two sides are together. And many have been killed by this point, and on the Trojan side, it's just women and who are now slaves, and they're going to be paired with Greek warriors, and they will be with those Greek warriors as slaves for the rest of their lives. And so this is the situation we're in. We have two main gods in this play that show up, Poseidon and Athena, and they have decided to join forces to make life difficult for the Greeks on the way home. The women, the main women in this play are Hecuba, Helen, Andromache, and Cassandra. I don't know who has suffered more between Hecuba and Andromache, but they have been through the ringer, and it just keeps getting worse and worse in this play, to where you don't know if there is a limit to the hopelessness one can experience, the sadness, the just utter devastation and destruction of everything that they hold dear. And it just keeps getting worse. And you can't even imagine how it can get worse, but it does. And so that's where we are. We even have we have one main man in this play, and that is Menelaus. And the presence of Helen is so interesting in this one, because all of the Trojan women hate her because she was the cause of the war. Menelaus, at this point, does not want her back, and he even makes a statement that the reason he came to Troy was in revenge, not to get her back. So everyone is calling for Helen's death, Menelaus among them. And so to see Helen amongst these groups and kind of fighting in a way of they're united in wanting to kill her, despite the fact that they've been fighting each other this whole time. And there are so many different themes in this play. You've got themes of fate and necessity, of just things that are going to happen, things that have been fated to happen. You've got the toll that war takes on the defeated, and you just have this utter destruction and hopelessness throughout this play. This one was written in 415 BC by Euripides, and it's part of war plays. And so the version that I read of this is the Oxford World's Classics, and this contains Hecuba, the Trojan Women, and Andromache. And so these three plays all deal with the war. And I read Hecuba. I covered that in another podcast episode. But that one pairs very well with this one, and I recommend reading that with the Trojan Women. And then I have Andromache coming up next. The translation I read was the one by James Morwood, and in this Oxford World's Classic, it also contains an introduction by Edith Hall that I found very, very interesting. So for the remainder of this episode, I'm going to cover some main characters. I'm going to cover Helen, Odysseus, and Andromache. And then in segment 3, I'll cover the one thing from the Trojan Women. Well, here are some of the characters that really stuck out in this play. We have Helen, Odysseus, and Andromache. And Odysseus is not in the play, but he is mentioned quite a bit. And so I want to start with Helen here. And it's just, as I mentioned before, it's so interesting to see her amidst both Greeks and Trojans. And there's a lot of anger against her. They see her as the cause. And the blame throughout is for her. Hecuba says, and all because of one marriage and one woman. And it's so interesting to contrast that to what Priam said, who blamed the gods in the Iliad for Helen and his son Paris coming together. And then you've got the chorus later on saying, unhappy Troy, you have lost countless men because of one woman and her hateful marriage. And then Menelaus, he has come to Troy to get his wife back, but is that the reason? But here he has a number of lines in this play, and here's one of his. I found this very interesting. This day's sun, with what splendid radiance it shines, this day on which I shall take possession of my wife, Helen. Yes, I am Menelaus, who went through many toils with the Achaean army. I came to Troy not for a woman's sake, as people think I did, but in pursuit of a man who cheated me, his host, when he stole my wife as plunder from my palace. Now the gods have ensured that he has paid the penalty, he and his land, which has fallen to the Greek spear. I have come to take off the Spartan woman. I call her that since I cannot bring myself to speak the name of my former wife. End quote. So you see a lot of bitterness here. He goes on to say, I will take her in my ship to Greek soil to hand her over there to be killed in retribution for all those whose loved ones died at Ilium. So he now wants to have her killed. This is the ex-husband, and we know from other literature later on that Helen and Menelaus do get back together. That doesn't happen in this play, but it's so interesting to see that. I didn't know that before this. Just that Menelaus, he states this reason for going to Troy to pursue the man who cheated him, and not necessarily to go get Helen back, and just how he wants to kill her. And then Hecuba too, she just hates her so bad, and everyone around them here wants to have her killed. But they worry about Helen being on the same boat as Menelaus on the way home, because they think he'll change his mind because of her wily ways, and they just think that she'll be able to trick him and get him back. So I'm curious to read other literature later on just to see if there's kind of that in-between story as well of what happens after this to where Helen and Menelaus get back together. Second character that really stuck out, even though he is not in the play, is Odysseus. And there are a number of comments about him, so I want to read a few of those. And the first one here is made by Hecuba. And Hecuba, in that play, again, I suggest reading that one before the Trojan Women. In that play by Euripides, we learn that Hecuba, when Odysseus came to Troy before the Trojan War and kind of scoped out the land as a spy, she saved him. He had to come to us as a suppliant to her, and she saved his life. And she reminds him of that, and it doesn't help in Hecuba, the play, but she knows Odysseus. And so here is her speaking in this play. The lot has assigned me as a slave to a foul man of trickery, an enemy of justice, a lawless monster who turns everything inside out and then back again with his double tongue, transforming men to hatred of what they once held dear. That's in that quote, and not very nice about Odysseus there, but she has been assigned to Hecuba. She has been assigned to Odysseus, so she will be his slave for the rest of her life, and that's what is supposed to happen at this point in the story. Later on, there is another comment about Odysseus, and something I just kind of track as I'm reading Greek literature here is just the different names of Odysseus and what people call him. And so here is another one, and this is Hecuba speaking again. You are far more worthy of honor than the arms of that monster of cleverness, Odysseus. So here she calls Odysseus that monster of cleverness. I also was thinking about Odysseus in this sense, where he has a number of women. So here Hecuba is assigned to him as his slave, and then on Odysseus's way home, he's on different islands with women, and you contrast that to Agamemnon, and then also the story of Heracles. And so Heracles is before the Trojan War, but there's this part of the story of Heracles where he comes back to his second wife after his labors, and he sends ahead of him Iole, and that's a slave woman that he has gotten, and he wants to marry her, and so he sends her back before him, and so Heracles' wife sees this, and it leads to a tragedy of Heracles sending this wife back ahead of him. And you have the same thing with Agamemnon, where when he returns home to Clytemnestra, he has Cassandra with him, who is a big part of this play. And she is the daughter of Hecuba, and she is also a prophetess. So she knows what's going to happen. She says a lot of things in this play too of the future. And so in both of those cases, the men paid dearly for having this woman come back with them. And there are other things going on with the Agamemnon story, but what if Odysseus had come back with Hecuba, or what if he had come back with one of the other women on his way back home and showed up in that same way? What kind of different reception would he have had in that story? It's just kind of one of those what ifs in Greek literature, but I just find it interesting. And when I was reading the Odyssey, it seemed like Odysseus's wife had the obligation to have sexual fidelity to Odysseus. Odysseus did not have that same requirement, and so he was not sexually pure in that sense of what was expected of his wife. But for him, the fidelity had to be directional. Like, he had to be facing home. Even when he's on the island with this beautiful woman who's offered him immortality, if he just stays with her, he's still looking out at sea. He's looking towards home. And so there's this directional versus sexual fidelity in that story. But you just wonder, would it have been different if Odysseus had showed back home with one of these women. So just kind of one of those what ifs. Third character I want to highlight here is Andromache. And Andromache, oh man, this was the most devastating character for me in this play. And so there's this thing called a ballot in the play where if no Greek warrior has claimed a woman, then they're put up in the ballot, and then they just go to whoever wins that ballot. But someone has claimed Andromache, and it is probably the worst person that could have claimed her. It is the son of Achilles. And the son of Achilles, Neoptolemus, is who has taken Andromache, and she will be his slave for the rest of her life. So again, Andromache was the wife of Hector. There's just some beautiful scenes in the Iliad between Hector and Andromache. Andromache has a young son, and this Hector is killed by Achilles. And so Andromache has to marry the son of her husband's killer. So you just think of the tragedy of that. Like, how would you even deal with that? And then it says she was married to Hector, the noblest of men. And so she's going from Hector to Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles. And there's a reason Neoptolemus wanted to have her. And so I want to read this part here. I always kept my tongue quiet and my expression calm. I knew in what spheres I should rule my husband, in what spheres I should concede victory to him. My reputation for these things reached the Greek army and has proved my ruin. For when I was captured, the son of Achilles wanted to take me as his wife. I shall be a slave in the house of a murderer. End quote. And so that's the reason Neoptolemus wanted her, for her character and just what she was known for in her marriage to Hector. And gosh, I just wrote, like in the margin there, I just wrote, this is the worst. Like she has to spend the rest of her life with her husband's murderer's son. Later, or around that same part, Andromache is talking to Hecuba, and Hecuba makes this statement: dying and living are very different things, my child. The former is nothing, but while there's life, there's hope. On the very next page, Andromache is replying to Hecuba, and she says this: surely the death of Polyxena, whom you mourn, is not more appalling than my fate. I do not even have what is a refuge for all mankind, hope. No, I do not delude myself that I shall meet with good fortune, yet even delusions are pleasant. End quote. So where Hecuba says, while there's life, there's hope, Andromache responds, and I do not even have what is a refuge for all mankind, hope. So Andromache has lost hope at this point. She doesn't even have that last vestige of something to hold on to. And oh man, just the devastation for Andromache in this play is just brutal. So I'll close out in the next segment with the one thing I'm still thinking about that I thought was the most important part of this play. Andromache makes a statement: "O you Greeks, you who have devised atrocities worthy of barbarians, why are you killing this innocent boy?" End quote. Gosh, this sentiment. The Greeks in their literature, they wanted there to be this separation between the barbarians and themselves, and yet in this war, what has happened is that the Greeks have devised atrocities worthy of barbarians, and then Andromache is asking, why are you killing this innocent boy? And the innocent boy is her and Hector's son. And it's the famous son from the Iliad who sees the armor and the helmet and the shining helmet of his father Hector and just starts crying. And just this deeply tender scene. You kind of, the innocence of childhood is confronted with the brutality of war. And he's scared of his father. And yet Hector takes off that helmet and embraces his son. And now this son is to be killed. And this is fated. This is what is supposed to happen. And there's this idea that the son could one day take the throne and get Troy back in the game, and then the Greeks would have to do this all over again. And so this son has to die. And so there's just this devastating part. And this is my one thing of just how sad this play is. And I think what I'm about to read is just a part that shows the utter hopelessness and devastation of this play. This is one of the people who give news, and this is from the Greek side, and he says this to the boy: "Come, boy, leave the loving embrace of your wretched mother, and come off to the top of the towers, that crown of the cities your fathers, where the vote decrees that you must breathe your last. Take him, such words befit a messenger, whose nature is made of sterner stuff, and more inclined to heartlessness than mine." And then Hecuba replies, "O my child, O son of my wretched son, your mother and I are being robbed of your life. There is no justice here. What am I to do? What service can I perform for you, ill-fated boy? I can give you these blows to my head, these hands pounding my breast. I have the power to do that. Woe for the city. I cry woe for you. What suffering remains for us to endure? What is there to stand in the way of our total destruction here and now?" End quote. Oh, that is so brutal. And yet, at the very end, Hecuba makes this statement: "Yet if God had not turned the world upside down, we would vanish into obscurity. We would never have given men to come the inspiration to sing of us in their song." End quote. That's a sentiment you see in the Iliad, and that choice Achilles had of staying and fighting and knowing that he would die soon, but having glory, or returning home, having no name, no lasting name, no podcast talking about him 3,000 years later. He would have none of that if he had made that choice. And so you get that same sense here at the end. Even amidst this devastation, there would not be songs. There would not be this new song called upon by the Muses of this devastation if it had not happened to these women. That devastation made them immortal. It showed the barbarism of the Greeks. And the Greeks in triumph now go back to the horrors that are arranged by the gods Athena and Poseidon. And that's where we're left. Just in this immediate aftermath of the war, we're left in just utter devastation. In closing, this is one of the most gut-wrenching works of literature that I've ever read. It shows the true cost of the war, and it shows the cost of the war to women. And it shows, amidst that, a dialogue with the source of the war, Helen. And that is just a really interesting and fascinating part of it. I suggest pairing this with the Iliad and with Hecuba, the other play by Euripides. Though you have to read this with the Iliad just to know all the connection points. But then also I would read the Iliad first, and then Hecuba, and then this one, the Trojan Women. In general, I suggest reading the tragedy. I read Homer first and then read the tragedies. And I was thinking about this earlier. If you dedicated 1 year, just 1 year of your life to reading this Greek literature, you could get through a lot of it. If you started the year reading the Iliad, give yourself a month or two for that, maybe another month or two for the Odyssey, and then start going through some of these tragedy plays. You can hit the top level ones, the most famous ones, or you could do kind of a deep dive and start with Aeschylus and then get into Sophocles and then get into Euripides. But the connection points, the way the story just connects more and more the more that you read. These are truly incredible works of literature, and they are worth the year of your life to go through these. So I want to encourage you to do that and to challenge you to do that. It will take a lot of time, but do it. Find a friend to do it with so that you can talk through these works. You'll understand a lot more when you can do that, or join a reading group that is going through these works, especially with the Iliad and the Odyssey, just to kind of get a start on those two works of epic poetry. That is going to do it for this episode. You can support this podcast if you get value out of it. I've got Substack options for $5 a month, $99 a year, or $500 a year. And I appreciate all of you who have supported the podcast in that. I had a new subscriber today. Thank you for that. As for what I'm currently reading, I am finishing up the Iliad because I'm leading a in-person reading group here in Franklin, Tennessee. And our last meeting is this upcoming Monday, and we're covering the last 3 books of the Iliad, which are my absolute favorite. So I can't wait to cover those. And then the week after that, I start a Catherine Project group where we're going through Thucydides. So I'm going to read as much Euripides as I can up until then, and then I need to start reading Thucydides, which it was around the time I was going to start doing that anyway. And so I'll read Thucydides, and then we have another work of history by Xenophon that we're going to go through as well as part of that Catherine Project. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to going through Thucydides with a group of other readers. Thank you for listening to this episode. I would love to hear from you. You can comment in Substack on this podcast episode, or you can send me an email at eric@booksoftitans.com. I would love to know what you think about the Trojan Women if you've read it. And I love hearing when I have gotten something wrong, or if you have another way that you've approached this play, or you had something stick out to you that you want to share. I would love to hear those things. You can follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter @Books of Titans. Please give a review for this podcast if you can as well. That really helps out just with other people finding it. I'll be back next week, probably be discussing another tragedy play by Euripides. But until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.